Dr. Claire Kennan, medieval historian. So, Claire, I'm going to ask you the big question first. Did the Battle of Lewes in 1264 lead to our democratic system?
I think I would say that it's a small step along the way, Mark. So to get the whole picture, we need to go back half a century. Magna Carta, which was first sealed in 1215, set out, among other things, that in order for the king to raise a tax from his people, he needed to get their consent. And to get that, he had to go through his tenants-in-chief, so the powerful barons, the churchmen and the local knights.
So, not an easy job then. How did he get their consent?
By calling all of these tenants-in-chief to a council to get them to agree to the tax. But unfortunately for the king, these councils, or parliaments as they became known, could be really feisty affairs. In order to get the money he needed, the king had to agree to some of his subjects' demands. So let's fast forward to 1258.
Let's.
So King Henry III has been on the throne for 47 years.
Since he was 9. So, man and boy. What was he like?
He was generous and extremely pious. He attended mass every morning and fed 500 paupers daily.
500. So, not a cruel man.
No, but an abysmal statesman. He followed bad advice, he seriously overspent, and he had a habit of promoting his favourites, particularly his French relatives.
What was his son and heir, Prince Edward, like?
Certainly he showed signs of becoming a much better leader and definitely a better military commander.
His nickname was Longshanks, wasn't it?
Well, he was 6'2", which was incredibly tall for the time.
All that royal grub. So, back to 1258, 6 years before the Battle of Lewes. So, what happened next?
Well, a group of barons seized power from the king, and they forced him to agree to a council of barons overseeing the entire administration of the country.
That must have been humiliating for King Henry.
It was. But these revolutionary reforms, which were called the Provisions of Oxford, were hugely popular with the knights and ordinary people.
So how did that lead to civil war?
Well, the barons start to fight among themselves, and this gives Henry the chance to regain some of his former power. But only Simon de Montfort stands firm, insisting the Provisions of Oxford should stand.
Ah, Simon de Montfort. Glad we've got to him. King Henry's opponent at the Battle of Lewes.
Yes. He was actually born and raised in France, but he had a hereditary claim to the earldom of Leicester. So he throws in his lot with England, and he even marries King Henry's sister.
So, he's related to the king by marriage. That must have given him a lot of influence at court.
When Simon and Henry got on, yes, but they frequently quarrelled. Unlike Henry, Simon was a charismatic leader who inspired great loyalty among his friends.
And Simon stayed true to the reforming cause, while others buckled under the influence of the king.
By 1263, Simon had emerged as the leader of a group of barons who wanted to reinstate the Provisions of Oxford. They took over London, and both sides started preparing for war.
And they met here, at Lewes, for the deciding battle, which Simon won.
Despite Henry's much larger forces.
A victory against the odds.
Yes, and in the negotiations that followed, it was agreed that the Provisions of Oxford would be fully reinstated, which made King Henry little more than a puppet at the hands of Simon and the rebel barons.
Well, how did they ensure that the king kept his part of the bargain?
Simon took Prince Edward as a hostage.
Ah, medieval skills.
And it was a necessary move because Simon's position wasn't strong. Over the next year, he called 2 parliaments to try and get the knights to agree to his reforms. And they did. But more importantly, for the development of democracy, it wasn't just the tenants-in-chief who were summoned to the parliament. Elected burgesses were summoned too, from towns around England.
Burgesses, they're freemen and merchants, aren't they?
Essentially, yes.
Elected democratically?
Well, except that you had to be wealthy and a man to vote.
No. Really? What happened to the charismatic Simon de Montfort?
Well, he started to lose the support of the barons, mainly because he was in the habit of taking the spoils of war for himself.
Not a good way to win friends and influence people.
No, and then Prince Edward escapes from his guards, and he joins up with other royal forces, and they defeat Simon and his army at the Battle of Evesham in August 1265. Simon himself is actually killed, and his body is mutilated in horrible ways that I won't go into here.
So, Longshanks gets his revenge, and King Henry gets his power back.
Yes, he does. And King Henry's on the throne for another 7 years. And once more, Parliament's only real power lay in occasionally refusing the king his right to raise a taxation. It would actually take the execution of King Charles I, nearly 400 years later, before any real power shifts away from the king into the hands of Parliament.
A fascinating story. Thank you, Claire.